Today I'll talk about the 5 causes of arm pump. Hey guys, welcome to MotoFit TV. This is episode number 13. Today we do have a few questions that come in, but I wanted to, because I get a variation of this question all the time, which is on arm pump. So just about, or a lot of people have dealt with arm pump at some stage in their life. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how to be able to deal with arm pump. Now, this is probably going to be a longer video, so if you are watching it, make sure you tag yourself at the bottom so you can watch it when you do have a bit of spare time, which is today. Make the time, is we're going to go through 5 key areas in terms of tackling arm pump. So everyone looks for the quick fix with arm pump. Everyone's after the number one magic vegetable that you've never heard of to be able to help with arm pump, to be able to cure it. They're after the special supplement, the special massage, the special stretch, the special tablet, vitamin, whatever it is, special aspirin, okay, or surgery, whatever it is, these crazy things to be able to get rid of arm pump. All arm pump is a deficiency in your training. It shows you that there's something wrong, okay? Much like when you put on weight, it shows a deficiency in your training and your nutrition, okay? When you don't have enough weight, when you may be underweight, it shows a deficiency in your training, okay? When you go for a run around the block and you can only get 5Ks out, but you want to get 10Ks, there's a deficiency in your training. The same thing with arm pump. It's no different to anything else. It shows that there's a deficiency in your training, in one of these 5 key areas or in multiple areas. The biggest mistake that a lot of riders and racers make is that assuming because they're doing something that it's optimized. They assume that because they're eating food, eating healthy, it's the right type of food. They're assuming because they're lifting weights, it's the right type of strength training. They're assuming because they're going for a run, it's the right type of conditioning. They're assuming because they do stretch, it's the right type of stretching. There's a whole heap more that we need to go into to make sure we're optimizing each of those key areas. So there's 5 key areas: nutrition, strength, conditioning, flexibility and mobility, and getting on the bike. So I'm going to go through all 5 areas. So like I said, it's important to optimize each area. Don't just assume because you're eating food, because you lift weights, because you go for a run that you've got all those areas nailed. Okay, that's probably more reason to be able to watch this video and watch it right through to the end. So I'm going to start off with the training component. So first of all, I want to talk about strength training. So every rider and racer's goal, 80% of their training should be made up of strength. Majority of your training should be made on getting stronger, because strength is what gives you the endurance. The stronger you are, the easier it is to throw around your bike. Your bike weighs roughly 100 kilos. Average rider racer, 80 kilos. That's 180 kilos you need to throw around. So the stronger we get you, the easier it is to throw around this 180 kilos. If your strength is down here and we're trying to throw around the bike, you're going to get tired very, very quick. Okay, it doesn't matter how long you cycle for, how long you run for, how many Ks of swimming you do, it's just not going to matter. So we need to make sure we're constantly getting stronger, okay? When we're constantly getting stronger, we need to make sure that strength applies directly to riding and racing. So that means multi-joint strength training movements. So we're talking things like deadlifts, back squatting, bent over rows, overhead press. It's just an example of some of them that you need to be implementing. And then you need to have the most optimal procedures within those movements, rep schemes, rest periods, to be able to make sure you're developing strength in those efficiently and as effectively, okay? Which is going to be outside the scope of what we're talking about today. So we need to make sure we're using those multi-joint movements because they teach our body how to be able to move optimally. Exactly how it works out on the bike, okay? So imagine this, we get you training during the week in exactly the same way you move on the bike on the weekend. How do you think that's gonna feel if we can get you 2, 3, 4 times as strong with those movements during the week? Obviously it's gonna be a shit ton better when you get out there on the weekend. So you wanna be able to make sure that you are optimizing how your body's working out on race day and making sure we're training it accordingly. In terms of how this ties in with arm pump, when we have when we have more strength, it becomes easier to throw the bike around. When it becomes easier to throw the bike around, we get less muscle fatigue because our body's not having to do as much work. When our body's not doing as much work, it doesn't get as tight, it doesn't have to hang on as much, which means the arm pump starts to disappear. The other thing that the multi-joint movements do is they help our body to work together as a system. Most riders and racers are too busy using machines, doing bicep curls, tricep extensions, getting on the leg press machine, or doing leg extensions. They're training the body in the complete opposite movement pattern of what's happening with their riding and racing on the weekend. So they train one way and then expect to get results in another way out on the bike. And they train in the complete opposite way. So when we're training in isolation, if I'm doing leg extensions or if I'm doing bicep curls and tricep extensions and a whole heap of isolation work, I'm training the body to work independently and then hoping that it all works together as a system on the weekend. It just doesn't work, it's the opposite. So what we need to be able to implement is those multi-joint movements. What they help to be able to do is get that body working together, so we have your whole body working together on the bike as a system to help hold you on there. When you have arm pump, it's not about your wrists being stronger or your forearms being stronger, it's about taking the load off your forearms. And that doesn't come from gripping your legs tighter. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard, is that try and grip with your legs tighter. Everyone's trying to grip with their legs. That's how you hold onto the bike. Okay, it shouldn't be something that you're going around for a 20-minute moto focusing on squeezing your legs as hard as you can. It means that you don't have the strength in your legs to be able to do that in the first place. It shouldn't be something you're isolating and focusing on while you're riding. You should be focusing on the racing. So what we want to be able to make sure is that we have the right levels of strength to get the rest of our body working as a system, which means that the rest of our body can work on holding us on the bike, which means that we have less load going through our arms. So when our arms are moving backwards and forwards, what that means is that it's not my wrists hanging on for dear life or my forearms hanging on for dear life. It's actually my upper back, my core, my legs. My whole body's actually working together to move me backwards and forwards, not just my forearms. So that's the reason strength's important. So that's number one. Number two is conditioning and cardio. So you want to make sure that with your cardio and conditioning, you are allowing yourself to still develop strength while replicating the intensity of race day. What does this mean? This means that what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to mimic the intensity of race day. When you are out on the track, riding and racing is not a consistent intensity sport. Okay, it's not slow, steady state cardio. It's not a cycling race. It's not a swimming race. It's not a run. Rowing, running, cycling have constant or consistent movement patterns, relatively consistent intensity for a long period of time. Motocross, enduro, road racing has the complete opposite, where you have fluctuating levels of intensity. Tackling a whole heap of braking bumps into a corner takes a shit ton more effort than actually going around the corner. We have fluctuating levels of intensity. So what we want to be able to make sure is we're replicating that intensity. If you're cycling, running, rowing, you're doing the complete opposite of what we actually need you to do or what you need to do on race day. So you can't expect to get back on the bike and be able to deal with the intensity and demands of racing and not get arm pump if you're training in the complete opposite way. So what you do need to do is implement a specific type of interval training, and what this means is implementing short, sharp bursts of high intensity activity, okay, and also helping to build stamina at the same time. An example would be, let's say you're on the exercise bike. Instead of doing half an hour on the exercise bike, you'd do 20 seconds work, flat out, as hard as you can go, 40 seconds of complete rest. And only repeat that 10 times. The whole workout goes for about 10 minutes. So the importance of that is that we're reflecting those fluctuations in intensity from race day with our training during the week. When that happens is when you'll start to notice big changes because your body's used to operating at that capacity. The other thing that the interval training helps to do is support strength building. When we combine strength training with swimming, rowing, running for long distances, they work against each other. Longer distance cardio causes muscular atrophy. What that means is that your muscle mass declines and so does your level of strength. So if you're trying to get stronger to make it easier to move the bike around, but you're still swimming, rowing or running for hours and hours and hours every week, then you're cancelling out all your training. It's like driving your car with the handbrake jammed on. So you need to make sure that we're replicating the intensity. The reason we replicate the intensity is it helps to get your body more efficient at taking in oxygen and get more oxygen to the muscles, which is like your fuel source for your muscles. So we want to make sure that they're getting heaps of oxygen so they can keep continuing with the same amount of output. Doesn't matter how strong you are or how fit you are, if we're not getting that oxygen to the muscles and it's not used to working at that high intensity, then we're going to have issues and your arms are going to start to blow up, okay? Because you're not going to get enough oxygen to them or to the rest of your body to help hold you on. So that's number two. So interval training. Number three is we can talk about mobility. So mobility Mobility and flexibility is very important because we want to make sure that we have full flexibility and mobility throughout the wrists and throughout your forearms. So what you'll find is in today's society, most people in general, not just riders and racers, are very, very good in flexion with their wrist, very strong, not so good with extension. Okay, so what that means is everything we do in day-to-day life, our wrists are always forward. So if I go and drive the car, hands are forward. If I'm on the computer, hands are forward. If I am doing whatever, okay, hands are always forward. Writing at the desk, if I'm using tools during the day, hands are always forward. We're always in that flexion position, okay? Now, we want to make sure that when our wrists are back, or when we go into a flexion, that we have that same amount of strength. Most people don't. So what starts to happen is we tighten up. So when you've got your wrists, or you get your hands on the handlebars, what will start to happen is when your wrist is going into extension or going into different positions, it doesn't have the flexibility and mobility. Your wrist is very, very strong going this way, but it doesn't go that way on the bike. It goes the opposite way, okay? Especially with your throttle hand, we've got the hands back. Or if you're up over the top, we're always more in extension than we are in flexion, okay? We're not riding our motorbikes like this. We're always more in extension. So what that means, if we don't have that extension, we don't have that flexibility and mobility, is that the muscles start to tighten up. So we've got muscles that are already tight, and then we're trying to stretch them out and trying to get them to do a heap of work and take a heap of load, and they don't want to do that because they haven't done it. So if you've been going like this all day, and then we get to the track and expect to go backwards, and then put a whole heap of force through them, it's not going to happen because we don't have the flexibility, we don't have the mobility. So the other area we need to work on is wrist strengthening and also flexibility and mobility through the wrist flexors and extensors. So your flexors, extensors, wrist extensors are on the top here. Okay, so you'll notice when you extend your wrist back, they tighten up, your brachioradialis. Wrist flexion, our forearm, is the one underneath. Okay, both of these need to be flexible, not just your forearm. If you're getting arm pump here, okay, that doesn't mean that you can forget about the extensor muscles. They work together as a system. You need to make sure the whole system's working, not just the parts of the system that you think need working. So that's very important. So working on stretches, so we can work on stretches on the floor. So you put your hand on the floor, or like this, and then leaning back. That's not a very good example, like this, but we're on the floor. We don't want to use our hands, we want to be on the floor. You can hold for, say, 2 lots of 1 minute on each side, okay? Working on really loosening them up. Now, the biggest mistake a lot of riders and racers make is assuming that the flexibility is the thing that needs work, and they'll skip all the other stuff. Getting rid of arm pump is a system. There's a hole in your training. So you can't just pick and choose the things that you like to do or the things that are easy. Like, it's easier to do the stretch right than it is to get proper programming. It's easier to do the stretch than it is to go and eat properly. So don't just jump to the easy conclusion. That should be one of the last things on your list before you've done everything else I need you to do. So I probably should have gone through that last. Fourth component is nutrition. So you need to be able to make sure that your body is fueled with the right type of fuels. So preferably we want to make sure that we're loading up on complex carbohydrates, sweet potatoes, brown rice, quinoa, the morning of and the night before riding and racing. So this is going to allow us to maximize the energy and max the level of glucose and glycogen in your body, okay, to get to those muscles, to get them working well. If we don't have those complex carbs going and we're not fueling yourself correctly, okay, you're just eating healthy, but you're not actually timing everything correctly and eating the right macronutrients at the right time, you'll get to race day, you'll have minimal amounts of energy, minimal amounts of glycogen in the muscle, which means that they have limited power or limited fuel supply. So you'll go and ride, you'll go and race, you'll go and train, and you'll fatigue very, very quickly. So that will contribute to arm pump, because if you're not eating properly, what will start to happen is all the foods you've taken in don't help to fuel the muscles have low fuel, they burn out quick. It's kind of like your bike. What happens to your bike when you don't put enough oil in it, right? It's going to go for a bit, but eventually it's going to blow up. Exactly the same things happens with your forearms. If you're putting a lot of work in to your training, but you're not eating properly, and then you rock up on race day and we don't have that glycogen in the muscle, what's going to happen is your forearms are going to blow up, and your whole body's chances are is going to blow up as well. That's the next thing. Fifth area for today is, let me add to one of the previous ones. Also, an adequate warm-up. A lot of riders and racers have problems with, they say, oh, I get arm pump in the first few laps, and then they stop, and then they keep going again, okay? And that comes from not warming up correctly. You need to have an adequate warm up beforehand, either getting on an exercise bike, doing some stretches, some wrist strengthening exercises, doing a 5-10 minute short workout warm up beforehand to make sure that you're ready to go. Okay, you can't think about, I don't know if you guys have ever trained, it's probably not the right time of the year for this example, but if you've ever trained in cold weather, you get up in the morning and it's really, really cold and you go outside and you try and train and your legs are stiff as. You probably experienced it maybe at a motocross meet. And your legs are really, really tight. You try and do squats and they're like, everything's really tight and sore and doesn't feel like moving. That's exactly what happens with your forearms. If you're not warming your body up, warming your forearms up and getting everything working, then you can't expect it to be able to perform. If it's not loose and elastic and it's more like steel wire, you're gonna have issues. Area number 5, bike time. You can't train and not get on the bike. Now that means at minimum you should be getting on the bike once a week to combat arm pump, okay? It doesn't mean you have to live on the bike to be able to not deal with arm pump. But what it does mean is that you can't be riding once every few months and expect to be able to put all the training in 4 or 5 times a week and then get on the bike and still have arm pump, okay? It means that you need to be able to train correctly, you need to be able to have those systems in place, but the skill is the most important thing. The bike time. So I went mountain biking a few weeks, or when I first started mountain bike, got into mountain biking over Christmas time. I was getting sore arms. I was getting arm pump on my mountain bike. My legs were getting sore from riding, okay? And I've been training 4 or 5 times a week for forever, okay? It's not because I'm not fit, it's not because I'm not strong, it's because I haven't spent any time on a mountain bike, because that's the skill, okay? It takes a lot less effort to be able to do something when you're comfortable with the movement pattern. I hadn't been mountain biking for ages, so it was relatively new for me. Same with your riding and racing. If you're only going riding once a month, then you need to be able to make sure you're getting on there once a week, because you're gonna get on the bike, your body's gonna go, what the hell is this? Takes a heap of getting used to. You don't have that support, stability out on the bike, which means that you're hanging on for dear life and your body's doing a shit ton more work, not just your forearms, but the rest of your body as well. So that's it for today. So they're the 5 key areas that I wanted to go through with you guys. So this is a relatively longer video, which has a heap of things in there for you to be able to work on. So don't cherry pick. Work through everything that I've given you, okay? Don't just go, I think it's nutrition, I think it's strength, I think it's conditioning. Work through everything. Do a complete overhaul of everything. If you think your nutrition's good, how can you make it better? If you think your strength training's good, how can you make it better? If you think your cardio conditioning is good, how can you make it better? Whatever it is, make it a shit ton better, okay? Optimize. There's something there. If you've got arm pump, don't rely on magnesium, don't rely on supplements, don't rely on anything else. Another one to add in there as part of those 5, which I missed in terms of nutrition, now that brings that up, is hydration as well. Making sure you're getting in enough water per kilo of body weight to be able to make sure that you're hydrated, because we don't want to run muscles with no water. So there's a whole heap of things. Don't rely on band-aid fixes. Don't rely on magnesium. Don't rely on a special vegetable, okay? Don't rely on eating a certain food the night before. Don't rely on getting surgery. I've heard of people getting surgery, which is absolutely crazy, to avoid doing the hard work, okay? Don't go for the easy options to avoid doing the hard work, putting the time in with your training, because that's all arm pump is, okay? It tells you that there's something wrong with your training. You should be grateful for having it, because it's giving you a warning, an indicator that there's something wrong with your training that you need to change, that's not working optimally. And that's gonna force you to be able to look at that. Don't use the Band-Aid, don't cover it up, work on fixing the underlying issue, and you can thank yourself for it later. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode on arm pump. If you've got any questions you'd like me to answer regarding arm pump, post them below in the comments, and I'll get back to you so I can try and help you as much as I can. Otherwise, I hope you have a great weekend of riding and racing, and I'll see you guys next week. See ya.